let's continue along with our coverage of the strategy session and how neoliberal TRIMET is following in the footsteps of all the other neoliberal transit agencies and are making riders the enemy by saying they're not paying is damaging the agency. We know that's not true, but we know that TRIMET, along with all the other ones, are saying that this is a huge problem for us. You know, it's propaganda. It's parroted by the media. The media is no longer an investigatory institution. It now is it's a bullhorn for government now. It's their propaganda arm.
If you're enforcement, shouldn't they're code enforcement, but they do address fair compliance out there. Mm-hmm. So we. All right. Yeah, Henson looks like. Is that better?
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. There we go. Sorry, that's my fault. Thanks, Director Edwards. So we have improved the amount of folks out there doing that work. So we do anticipate that we're going to have better.
So they're getting all these new security fare evasion people, but they don't have enough drivers. So once again, you see the evidence of their backward priorities. Oh, and by the way, before we go any further, let me show you something right here. Oh, I can't. Can I? Oh, what do you mean preview? Didn't I publish this? All right, here it is.
And just a reminder for all trains out there, special instruction, I think it's 432, came out, and we are no longer required to say over. And our radio transmissions are over. So you can look that up if you'd like, the special instruction now to eliminate.
Yeah, so they got rid of that stupidity. A very good example of the kind of cluelessness of the management, by the way. It's like they're always sticking their nose, and if it's working, it's working. But they can't stop changing things because it's their fucking career. I mean, they make money, and they have to have say they're doing something. So this is what you get.
Better compliance going forward with that work being done. Mm-hmm. But to JC's point earlier, during COVID, we didn't do that work very often at all. And so we're kind of in a new normal there. But with the increases, we expect that compliance to go up.
So what they're going to do is they're going to criminalize the fare evasion. All the shit that's going on in the city of Portland, in the country. And we see the same thing around the country. So we know it's not coming from TRIMET. It's coming from a higher source. So somebody somewhere at the very top echelons of technocracy has told the transit agencies to do this. And it's the neoliberal leaders who will kill us all if we keep following their orders.
Are you at full capacity then with staffing, or are there plans to increase from the 37 that you have?
That's a good question. We're probably going to go up from there. And we just have now brought on, so when it takes some time to train folks, and we engage in a lot of training around this work. It's really complex work, and we want to make sure it's done right and equitable.
It's not done right. It's not done equitable. You hear lots of complaints about these fare inspectors. We know how the TRIMET operators are not exactly the most intelligent people, with some very notable exceptions of very good operators, of course.
So we just brought on the 37, but we're going to go up from there.
So they got 37. They hired 37 of these people that are not going to be of any service to the community. They're out there to oppress the community, basically. What they need is security. They don't need fare inspection. Okay, this is backwards.
And we're kind of working on that now in terms of what that right number is as we go through the budget process.
Okay. First, I'm going to go to Director Way, and then Director Lewis has a question.
Thank you, Andrew, for that data. I just want to note, I didn't, in the printed handout, we didn't have this slide.
It's just too bad they're sock puppets, you know. It's a shame because I think some of them actually do want to know and do want to do the right thing. But they can't do the right thing because they know that they can't. They just shut up when they're supposed to shut up. They don't follow up anything.
In here, so just want to make that note, just for folks with handouts.
Hold on, we got a breaking news.
So he is waiting there. There is no bus. He is waiting for that bus, but there is no 7705. So that driver's just waiting there to be the relief for the bus that is not coming.
So I guess my question is, how much are we spending on fare inspectors currently? And then what is you had mentioned the increase of FTE, I imagine. I'm just trying to make sense of our dollar amounts for how much we're actually spending on fare inspectors.
Yeah, boy, off the top of my head, it's a good question. Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure what that budget is.
Why don't you know that? You're the executive director. That should be right on the top of your tongue. Hold on.
You can ride it that's faster. Otherwise, he can take a bus back to the garage. Either way.
Okay, I'll give him a ride. We'll do that.
Thank you. 1447. 9101, did you copy?
I want to say, yeah, it's about 3, because I think the increase was about 1.5, but I'll get you that number in specific. And it's a little complex because fare is just one portion, of that team, right? We have other teams out there that don't do, like we've shared about the safety response team, obviously Allied Security, they don't do any fare work at all, and that's intentional. But those additional folks that were brought on the 19, I think it was a $1.9 million investment. And so as we consider those kinds of things going forward, we're going to need to kind of think about how much we're spending. It's a good question.
Yeah, you should have the answer right off the top of your head because it's well known that the cost of enforcing the fares is actually larger than what they can get back from that. They're spending more to enforce the fares than the fares are worth. This is well known in the industry. Plenty of studies. It's got nothing to do with money. It's got to do with oppression of poor people. You have to understand this is the society we live in here. Criminalize as many people as you can. That's how this country works. People don't really understand how morally bankrupt our society actually is, and it's just incredibly morally bankrupt.
But Director Ray, I'd also just say, so our customer safety supervisors do a lot more than just fare inspection. They're absolutely a presence on the system. 1, 2, they're answering questions, they're performing customer information type of duties, and they're also enforcing code, smoking, drug use, all of those different things. They're helping to ensure the safety of our passengers on board.
Yeah, sure they are, right? Yeah, sure, yep. Believe you hack. He's a real hack.
So while the expense, it's being that you have that expense, it's doing a lot for that amount of dollars.
Yes.
Thank you. No, and I do appreciate folks who are, on our system, who are unarmed, who are trying to provide the best customer service available. But, and I've said this before, I do have some issues with, I think the way that oftentimes we criminalize folks because of their inability to pay. And I know that we have worked on decriminalizing our system through, the committee work that we have. So I think we're making great progress there.
Let's get clear about this. This is also false information, because if you don't do what the TRIMET, you have various options with these fare evasion tickets. You can pay a reduced fine. I guess they reduce it by half. They give you the option of buying a hop card, I think, which is actually a pretty good option. And they give you the option of community service. That's better than it was, yes. But the next step, if you don't do that, is you still end up in court, okay? If you just take the ticket and throw it away, you end up in court eventually. So it's not decriminalized. It's only decriminalized if you follow their procedures. If you don't follow their procedures, you end up in criminal court.
But but I guess I'm still kind of grappling with the $3 million that we spend just on hiring folks to check fares, and just seeing if that would be up for another discussion.
Well, and remember, it's not just to check fares. It's a position that does more than check fares. Go ahead and
and there's what's her name here? She's the head apologist. It's a position that's not necessary. Now the reason they're there is to check fares. Okay. That their specific purpose is fare checking. The rest of it is fluff.
explain again the role of.
Yeah, and they do so much.
We see plenty of video and pictures of these people hanging around. They travel in packs. There's like 6 of them together. They don't even spread them out. They're in packs. And I've got plenty of video and pictures of them just hanging around, chatting with each other, playing with their phones. They don't do more.
More. I mean, they really do. They're answering questions.
Yeah, sure they are.
They're providing, especially during bus bridges when we have.
Well,
they're providing.
Okay, that's a good thing. Yes. Okay, yeah, that's probably true, and that's good, of course, because TRIMET is one big giant clusterfuck.
Directions for people. So fare enforcement is a fraction of their overall job.
Fare enforcement is the number one reason they're there, though. Don't let them bullshit you with this.
Duties when they're on our system.
Yeah, and Andrew, you can probably.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's a great question, and it's good to illustrate the kind of the complex nature of that job. And I say that because they're doing absolutely more than fare enforcement. They're checking on.
Yeah, they're sitting around chatting or playing with their phones. That's what they're doing, folks. You're not hearing the truth because they don't tell you the truth.
Kind of TRIMET code and making sure those codes are followed and complied with. They're also working with law enforcement at times to identify different issues that are going on out there. So it's a real investment in not only fare enforcement, but it just kind of moderating behavior and being a good presence for ensuring that TRIMET code is being followed out there.
And then are there going to be some plans in the works around sort of the rider ambassadors or rider advocate program? I've heard that was part of some of the work that we're trying to roll out forward are folks who are actually, kind of maybe doing that, but then also playing more of like a rider ambassador.
Really, our safety response team is really going through that function. It's a great question, and part of the work that we're doing in Reimagine right now, which Dr. Lewis, is chairing with us, and is really defining what rider ambassador-like work is being done already by the safety response team. And what we're kind of going through in that process is that crosswalk to understand what that team is accomplishing is really rider ambassador work. It's connecting with folks. It's being a resource. It's a little bit more, I think, than what we had in rider ambassadors in the past. And that, these folks are carrying around water bottles, granola bars. They're really kind of trying to meet kind of human need out there as well. But they certainly fulfill the function of a rider ambassador for us.
And then, sorry, one last question. So is the money that we're spending on, again, some of the positions that Andrew's mentioned, that is coming out from our operating, are those our operating costs?
No, those are system costs.
Okay, so completely different.
Operating costs are transportation and maintenance.
Okay.
What?
So these positions that Andrew mentioned are not coming out of the fares?
Yep.
No.
Correct.
Yes, well,
Okay.
that's...
Okay, thank you.
And I'll go to Dr. Lewis now.
Well, thank you, President Simmons, and was listening and asked my question. Just to be clear, TRIMET variation is 18%, 18.2%, and this is from our 2019 numbers. Based on that, there's no pickup, we do not know the impact of fare evasion on the decrease of our fares. I haven't seen it in slides.
Right.
We have a decrease, but for 2 years, we do not know the impact of that.
Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Simmons. I don't know if Dr. Lewis's comment was fully.
why didn't they let the big shot answer his question?
Received, or if there was a question there.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
right.
thought,
That's right, Ozzy. Good. Yeah, why did you just go over to Ozzy? And she asked a question, and then Simmons is bad, okay? She's as bad as Warner was.
you were going to answer her question.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Let's answer Dr. Lewis's question first. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
Director Simmons is displayed on the slide. For each 1% of fare evasion, it's roughly $1 million in loss.
Right. Director Lewis, does that answer your question? And that we have not done any surveying to determine current levels of fare evasion. It's something that we do not every year.
We don't.
In other words, if we looked at 2019 and we looked at the fare revenue we had with an 18.2% fare evasion, what could our fare revenue recovery have looked like? Is that what you're saying? Okay, yeah. I don't know the answer to that, but possibly someone does. Oh, it's 18 million. It's 18.
Yes, but the question is then, is what would our fare box recovery ratio been? So I can bring that back. That'll be something I just...
Okay, we'll come back to that, Dr. Lewis, as soon as we, that would be the loss of the revenue, but not necessarily the ratio. So we'll come back to that. Director Gonzalez?
What's going on?
Oh, Bonnie? Oh, we can't hear you.
You really practically never in an open system get to a 0% rate, and you're doing superbly if you're at 6 or 7%. But there is that cost balance of what it costs for enforcement. So in some of these, like King County, 6%, that's very low. Where did we get some of those numbers? I thought that was interesting, the 6%.
I'm not sure the source, but we surveyed all of these counterparts.
So anyway, we just would never get to that full 18 million or whatever. We'd be very lucky to get to 12.
Yeah. Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Simmons. So I have a question, but first a clarification to make. So in the fare box recovery ratio slide, and I have it as slide number 5 in the presentation, when it defines the operating cost, the cost it takes to run service, it does include security in addition to lubricants and operators and other things. So I was curious to know if there's a line here between security personnel that fits here and ambassador personnel that does not. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. So there are a few positions that are specifically included in the operating costs, but safety and security as a whole is a system cost. It's above the operating costs, the vast majority of it.
Is that normal? Is that standard in the industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're looking at operating costs, you really just are talking about what does it take to drive the bus down the road. All of those costs associated with that, or the max, right?
The word security made it fuzzy for me. So what is inside of operating costs in under security?
I can get you some specific details on that.
I wasn't sure if it was personnel or if it was things like the safety dividers.
Yeah, I see where you're headed. No, we're talking personnel costs there. Now we do have, so for example, the operating bus barrier, which we're improving, in the next couple of months, which we'll talk about later this month. I'm going to do kind of more of a comprehensive security update alongside Bonnie. But those costs would be covered under maintenance and that sort of thing. That's accurate, right?
Yes.
So it would just be personnel costs for security, not necessarily
But the safety inspectors, the unarmed.
Let me read this from Streets blog. This is from the Streets blog. The American moral panic about fare evasion regrettably goes far beyond New York. 2 years ago, BART announced that it would supplement its fare barriers with proof of payment inspections done by armed police and lied to the public about the prevalence of such belts and suspenders system. More recently, it tried out a new turnstile system that would hit passengers in the face, but thankfully scrapped it after public outcry. Boston, too, has its moral panic about fare evasion in the form of campaigns like the Keolis Ring of Steel on the commuter rail, or Fair is Fair. Fair is Fair. Remember TriMet did that? All a bunch of baloney. In talking to Americans about fare evasion, I found they are generally receptive to the idea of minimizing revenue loss, net collection costs. However, I've counted more resistance about the idea that people should just be able to walk onto a bus or train. Yeah, I mean, they created, you know, I talked to the Willamette Week about this years ago, and they set up a system of entrapment, okay? Because you just walk on. There's no reason to not. So I mean, it's an entrapment system when they should have had fare gates at all the MAX stations. And McFarland had said, and he lied, that there would be fare gates on the Orange Line. He lied. Nobody remembers that, but I do.
Safety response team, thank you. They would not be included in operating costs then?
I'll get you a breakdown of that.
That would be great. I'm just looking at it because we are growing that force. I think they're a major factor in that user experience, and at the same time, I wasn't sure if we're also sort of representing them in a sort of top-heavy model because it's not considered part of the operating cost. So that was the question. That was the clarification. I mean, with regards to my question, it sounds.
Of course, it's part of the operating cost. That will be funded from your payroll tax. They say it's not part of the operating cost, but it comes out of the same revenue, so it is.
Sounds like the answer is not yet, but when do we find out if, you know, this safety response team investment is yielding reductions in fare box evasion? Are we getting a 3% reduction in fare box evasion for this sort of?
Notice how there's no discussion about poor people. None. It's just, how do we get these people to pay their fare? They have no heart, no empathy for the transit-dependent riders who are in the ditch. There's just none, no talk of it. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. It's just who they are, man, you know? Oh, let me see, Alan Kessler. Oh.
Of investment, when do we learn these things?
Yeah. Andrew is going to give us a very comprehensive report at our October board meeting, but to find out what the response is in terms of declining our fare box, our evasion number, it will take another survey to do that. So you will be able to talk anecdotally about what people's experience is that are checking fares, but we won't actually have aggregate data available in October.
Thank you. I sensed the answer would still be not yet, but when about? Like, are we thinking that we're a year out before we even begin to see anything we can point to?
Well, couple things, and then I'll give it to JC to find out about survey work in terms of when we'll know some of those answers. But just to kind of clarify, the safety response team will not discuss fare. You should, customer safety supervisors will, and I know there's terminology there is really kind of confusing. But the customer safety supervisor investment, I think, is what you're alluding to, and we'll find that out after the survey. But safety response team, I just want to clarify that because we really do want to make sure that those folks are not connected to fare enforcement. They're really doing that function of connecting with people and making sure they have the right information or supported. JC, do you have thoughts on survey?
Yeah, we haven't mapped it out just yet on the survey, but hopefully next spring.
Mr. Gardner, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, a few comments to what was said earlier. Just the first thing I'd say is, and this is on the safety response team and rider ambassadors, we are working with Reimagine, and we've sent out the safety response team job description, the rider ambassador program that the city of the streetcars uses, and our old historical rider advocate program to all of our Reimagine members to show them the differences and the similarities. The safety response team is like 95% the same. And we've asked, what else can we do to make this even more community friendly? But I'm glad we've separated their fair inspection is not one of their roles. And I think already, and you'll hear this next month, there's been a ton of positive reinforcement. What I really wanted to address, which seemed to like float by this conversation, is that we were doing it more regularly, the fair evasion survey. And so when I got here in 2015, the number of people who said fair was an issue was more 5 or 6%. So to move that down to 2%, I think, is connected to all of our fair subsidy programs. But again, if you unpack that, only 2% of those 10,000 brought up fair, and the cost of fair is an issue. So I think a lot of what we've done through the low-income fair program and many other things are working. And then lastly, I want to make sure folks, especially the TIAC folks, get credit for all the efforts TRIMET's made to decriminalize the system. So that was a formal letter that the committee developed in 2016, submitted to the board.
Except they didn't decriminalize it. I'm going to keep making sure you understand that they did not decriminalize it. They decriminalized it with conditions.
The board enacted all of those changes, and since 2018, police no longer inspect fairs.
Yeah, the police don't inspect fairs, but they're standing there while they're inspecting fairs. So they're basically inspecting fairs. Okay. See how they're not honest in any of their presentations. They're not honest. These people are not honest. Everything they say is basically it's distortion of facts, because they don't give you all the facts. They only give you some of the facts, and this is how TRIMET and all the rest of government funds. Not just them, folks. They might be my laboratory that I work with. You know, I work on this particular subject because I have this connection there. But it's the same in all government. They're never going to say anything that makes themselves look bad. That's never going to happen. They're always going to say they're good, they're great, and we're doing the best job ever. There's never going to be a time you're going to see any of these people be actually honest.
Since 2018, if you get cited for fair evasion, you can have an administrative review. It could be forgiven, you could be given community service in lieu of fine, or you can sign up for the low-income fair program. So, and of course, many years ago, we've gone unarmed, where groups like properties like Seattle, just up the river, they have armed fair inspection. So I think we are far beyond decriminalizing the fair inspection process. That has been happening for almost 5 years. So when I hear that, I feel we're doing a disservice to all the work we've done with the community to make our system more safe and welcoming. So just want to make sure people understand within that there's a lot of really good news.
Thank you. Nancy, do you have the answer for Dr. Lewis on how had we had zero fair evasion in 2019, how that would impact our fare box recovery?
Yeah, we can get that for you.
Oh, it's not something you can calculate right now.
Yeah, because I need the other numbers.
You were just calculating it. Okay. We'll get back to you on that, okay, Dr. Lewis?
President.
Yes.
Just to kind of.
All right, so here it is. This is right off the TRIMET webpage. Okay, listen. Okay, we've used the rules to govern our system, the TRIMET code, to prohibit arrest for fare evasion only. When an inspector checks your fare, you aren't being detained in a legal sense. But if you choose to walk away without showing your fare or refuse to identify yourself, a nearby law enforcement officer will detain you. Okay, so yes, the cops are not looking at the fare, but they're standing right there. So it's they've complied technically with the letter, but not the intent of the law. So don't let these people lie to you, man. Okay, it's because that's what they're doing. And I'm the only one out here that calls them out on anything.
Maybe wrap up this conversation. I would just be very interested in looking at all the breakdown of the personnel and the positions. We heard ambassadors, rider advocates, safety response team, unarmed private security folks. So I just want to understand the ecosystem of all of these folks who interact with our public, either check fares or don't fares. And then I still have a lot of questions around code enforcement. We don't need to get into this, but I just want to be able to, make sure that I'm doing a thorough job as a steward of public resources to let the public know these are the people who are on our system.
All right, let me list. This is from the TRIMET webpage. Also, I heard that fare inspections are unconstitutional. Why are they still in effect? Here's what they say. The opinion issued by a judge in the 2018 court case, you remember that, I forgot the name of the woman, a Hispanic woman, found that a specific fare inspection had been unlawful. They're saying it was only that one inspection that was unlawful. The opinion was in conflict with other court opinions and did not have any bearing on a fare inspection practice. Well, they're lying. That's another lie. The the district attorney did not appeal the decision. So when they say the opinion was in conflict with other court opinions, they're lying. Or else the district attorney or the attorney general of whichever fucking state-sponsored criminal, because they're all criminals, whichever state-sponsored criminal did not appeal it, which means this ruling does apply. Okay, it does not. You cannot say it has other opinions. It would have been appealed, and they didn't.
Who are doing X, Y, and Z for you.
Right. I think that's understood. And, I remember when I was on the Safety Security Committee before the Reimagining Public Safety, I said I wanted to make sure that we had a way of delineating what each person's role was and I think we've gotten to the point of having different kinds of uniforms and titles and things like that. I understand that Dr. Edwards has a comment. Dr. Edwards? Oh, now I've never been good with titles, so I'd really like to be on a first name basis, but that's not the culture of this organization. So you are a doctor today, okay?
So the fare evasion citation is only waived under these conditions. Okay, so let's get this straight, because they're lying here. Fare evasion citation is waived if an adult rider meets all of the following conditions. Eligible for, but not already enrolled in an honored citizen reduced fare program based on low income, age 65 plus, Medicare or mental or physical disability. Successfully enrolls within the 90 days, loads a minimum of $10 on a reloadable hop card within 90 days. So unless you're eligible for the HC card, you do not have any way to get out of your ticket, okay? So that means if you're just some guy that didn't pay his fare and you're not eligible for HC ticket, you need to pay your $75 fine or do your 4 hours of service or whatever.
Yeah, we have rate of compliance kind of rate that we use with the customer safety supervisors. And there's lots of different measures there. I'd be happy to provide those. And I'll say this as well, and I think this goes to Director Way's question too, is part of that update at the end of this month, and I kind of went over some of these roles in August, but I'm going to be bringing that back forward and really just explaining, each one of these roles, where their impact's at, kind of in a more comprehensive update, which I think will be helpful. We also may hear from a member of the SRT team. And so I think that'll be it'll help us kind of all understand kind of the direction we're headed. So.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I don't know that you need to do this, but if we knew what they looked like, what their uniforms look like.
Yes.
So, because we've got different kinds of security.
All right, let me read this to you. This is, there's all kinds of interesting information here. This was in 2021. A recent decision from the Oregon Court of Appeals could determine whether or not police are allowed to ask passengers for proof of fare. In a January ruling, the appeals court reversed a 2017 Washington Circuit Court decision that allowed evidence. This is different from the other case that I mentioned. This went past me. The Washington County case centers on Ahmed Alamamoud. Ahmed something I can't pronounce. Alamamoud. A man who was stopped by Tualatin police officer on Max train in 2017. The Tualatin officer was part of TRIMET's Transit Police Division from different agencies that had contracts to provide security. Since 2018, routine fare checks hadn't been part of the division's primary duties, but they still have the authority to check for proof of fare. Okay, this just contradicts what they just said. They can still check your fare if they want to. So they lie. This is a Mercury article. Alamahood failed to show the officer proof that he paid for his ride. The officer ran his name through a police database and found that he had an exclusion. The officer then searched him, found he was carrying up. So here you go. This is in 2021. The officer searched him, found he was carrying brass knuckles, and charged him with felon in possession of restricted weapons. In pretrial hearing, Alamahood's lawyers argued that brass knuckles shouldn't be considered evidence at trial since they were found during a random fare check, an unconstitutional search. The circuit court disagreed and allowed the weapon to be referenced, which resulted in a guilty verdict. The Oregon Court of Appeals agreed the police enforced fare check violated the Oregon Constitution. In its ruling, the court argued that the police officer's action constituted an unreasonable search and seizure as defined by the Oregon Constitution because random fare check lacks any reasonable suspicion that a person had actually committed a crime. Additionally, because the fare check was carried out by a cop rather than an unarmed TriMet employee, the court wrote that reasonable TriMet passengers would have concluded that the officers conducting the fare check were significantly interfering with passengers' liberty. In other words, Alamamoud was forced to comply with the officer's request despite no clear indication he had broken a law, and he could reasonably conclude there would be no serious consequences. There's Chris O'Connor. He's a very good public defender up there. Told the Mercury the Appeals Court ruling could be interpreted to mean that police shouldn't be conducting random fare checks on TRIMET. I think the ruling allows a person sitting on a Max train, they're sitting there and a cop says, "Hey, I need to check your fare." You can answer, "No, thank you. Have a nice day," said O'Connor, who is representing himself and not advocating for his clients. And anything the police do after that would not be considered permissible in court. O'Connor said it may be still permissible for police to check fares if they have reasonable suspicion to believe someone didn't pay. Person didn't tap their hop card, but if random sweeping fare check conducted by officers result in legal penalties against people, the Court of Appeals decision should be cited. Okay. So there you go. So they're still checking fares and they still can't. So they're lying, and I've had enough of this for today. And so we're over and out.